hari pertama sampai hari ini kopi kenal tuh profitable nih.
Luar biasa.
Untuk tahun ini kita ingin mengakhiri tahun 2020 dengan 700 gerai seluruh Indonesia.
First half of 2020, Bank Tabungan Negara recorded net profit of 768 billion rupiah. As large-scale social restrictions cooling down, June domestic flights capacity increased. Domestic flights. Good afternoon, viewers in Indonesia and Singapore. Market Headlines is ready to provide you a number of informations from business, economic, and capital market sectors. With me, Claranta Wijaya, and this is Market Headlines. And yes, viewers, we are going to start market headlines by looking at the Jakarta Composite Index intraday movement. So JCI opened at the level of 5,051.98, and then approaching the closing time of the first session, the index was on the level of 5,062.79, and the index was showing strengthening trend by the second session closing time. The index was closed at the level of 5,075, and in short, JCI was strengthening at 1.37%. And next, we are going to see the sectoral movement. Leading the dynamics of today's trading, we got agriculture as the leader of the strengthening trend, going up 1.99%, basic industry going up 1.86%, and manufacture going up 1.74%. And the leader of the weakening trend, we got constructions that going down 0.21%. And as the top gainers in today's trading, here's the list of the stock for you. We got BBRI with a value that went up 3.01%. We got ICBP with a value that went up 7.8%. We got TOWR with a value that went up 2.65%, and INDF with a value that went up 4.25%. And meantime, for the top losers for today's trading, we got BULL with a value that went down 4.46%. We got SMRA with a value that went down 1.79%. And we got PTPP with a value that went down 2.2%. And also ZINC with a value that went down 1.46%. And next, we are going to see the intraday movement of rupiah towards US dollar. So rupiah opened at the level of 14,697. Rupiah was also showing weakening trend towards US dollar. I was closed at the level of 14,674. And in summary, rupiah was weakening at 0.53%. Bank Tabungan Negara, or BTN, managed to record positive performance throughout the first half of 2020. The positive performance can be seen on company's net profit reaching 768 billion rupiah.
Bank Tabungan Negara recorded net profit in the first half of 2020 amounting to 768 billion rupiah. Net profit was supported by net interest income, which came from lending amounting to 251.83 trillion rupiah. President Director of Bank Tabungan Negara, Pahala Mansyuri, said that with a better net profit compared to 2019, the company is more optimistic in its performance in 2020.
Dan hal ini juga terlihat dari total laba yang kita bukukan di triwulan akhir daripada semester pertama yang lalu, di mana total laba yang kita bisa bukukan sudah mencapai 768 miliar rupiah dibandingkan dengan total laba kita di full year tahun 2019 yang lalu yang hanya sebesar 209 miliar rupiah. Ini tentunya merupakan kondisi-kondisi yang menunjukkan bahwa kita lebih optimis mengenai kinerja kita di tahun 2020 ini dibandingkan dengan tahun 2019 yang lalu.
Even in the first half of 2020, subsidized mortgage loans grew by 5.84%, while for third-party funds grew by 2.99% in June 2020 to 226.32 trillion rupiah. From Jakarta, Wicky Adrian for IDX Channel.
In the extraordinary shareholders general meeting, consumer goods company Indofood CBP Sukses Makmur officially received a green light from investors to acquire Pine Hill Company Limited.
In the extraordinary shareholders general meeting, consumer goods company Indofood CBP Sukses Makmur officially received a green light from investors to acquire Pine Hill Company Limited. Based on the official statement, Indofood announced that 52.27% of the total shareholders present at the meeting approved the jumbo value corporate actions. With the compositions of more than 50% of the votes in support of the corporate action, the First Pacific Company handed over the decision-making authority for PCL acquisitions to Indofood. For additional information, Indofood plans to acquire Pine Hill with a nominal value of $2.99 billion or 44 trillion rupiah. Management said that the majority of transactions will be financed by bank debt with a loan tenor for 5 years. Meanwhile, Indofood previously estimated net profit growth of up to 20% per year due to the acquisitions of Pine Hill Company Limited. With the calculations of management's calculations, this year the company could have made a net profit of up to 6.04 trillion rupiah after the acquisitions transactions was completed. From all sources for IDX Channel.
Stay tuned on market headlines because we will be right back after this quick break.
Pak Hendra, analisis Anda untuk pergerakan indeks harga saham gabungan.
Jadi di high di masa 2 tanggal 9 Juli ini adalah salah satu yang sangat signifikan karena dia akan membentuk box baru.
Dampak pandemi COVID-19 tidak hanya dirasakan oleh sektor swasta.
Jadi dalam kondisi normal, kami tiap hari untuk angkutan penumpang itu bisa mendapatkan sekitar 23 miliar. Sekarang ini hanya sekitar 300-an juta.
Executive Chairman MNC Group Heri Tanusudibyo mengatakan sektor ekonomi di bawah perdagangan yang labor intensif.
Selain itu, BKPM mengklaim terdapat 119 investor lainnya yang berpotensi merelokasi industrinya dari negara lain ke Indonesia. Proyeksi yang sudah ditetapkan gitu ya di tahun 2021, tanggapan dari Anda terlebih dahulu seperti apa ini Pak Peter?
Pertumbuhan dampak dari wabah COVID ini terhadap perekonomian Indonesia itu relatif kecil ya dibandingkan negara-negara lain.
Saksikan terus IDX Channel, Your Trustworthy Economic, Business and Capital Market Channel.
Welcome back to Market Headlines. Global economic recession threat on Indonesia is arguably inevitable. Various scenarios that are less encouraging about economic growth in the second quarter of 2020 make the recession signal even stronger.
Global economic recession threat on Indonesia's economy is arguably inevitable. Various scenarios that are less encouraging about economic growth in the second quarter of 2020 make the recession signal even stronger. Moreover, several countries have been confirmed to have experienced a recession, including Germany and the United States, which recorded GDP dropped quite deeply, while Germany minus 2.3% in the second quarter, whereas the United States minus 32.9%. Meanwhile, the Indonesian government, together with Bank of Indonesia, continues to make efforts to accelerate Indonesia's economic recovery, which is estimated to have a negative growth in the second quarter. This effort is of course also carried out to prevent Indonesia from entering economic recession. Related to this, economist Fitra Faisal emphasized that Indonesia should first mitigate the handling of COVID-19 because he believes that the economy will gradually recover if COVID-19 can be handled properly. From all sources, IDX Channel.
Economic recession's wave has hit a number of countries, including large countries such as United States and European Union. How is the impact on Indonesia? That's the real question. So before we talk further about it, let me remind you what is actually the recession is about. Here it is. Through the graphic, we can see the definitions of recessions itself. First of all, when an economy experiences a decrease in its gross domestic product for 2 consecutive quarters. And then it leads to some indicators. First of all, the GDP rate contractions of a country. And the second of all, the rising number of unemployments. And the third one is that falling retail sales. And not to mention about the slowed manufacturing growth that existed in one country. And the last one is that the last indicator would be the decline in the real personal income. In a recession, we may feel these compounding effects in a few different ways. Jobless claim go up, spending habits changes, sales slow down, and economic opportunity dwindle. Meanwhile, the causes of recessions are economic shocks, loss of consumer confidence, and high interest rate, and also deflations. But somehow, in fact, recessions are considered to be a normal part of the economic or business cycle, where business cycle consists of expansion, peak, and contraction through. So, which countries that have been confirmed to have experienced a recession? So let's move on to the next graphic to have a clearer view about that. Here it is. We can see some countries that have stated that they are in the conditions of the recessions. First of all, United States. In the first quarter of 2020, the economic is in the number of minus 5%, but however, in the second quarter of 2020, the number went down to be minus 32.9%. And moving on to the Asia ones, we got Singapore. In the first quarter of 2020, the economic is minus 0.3%, but however, in the second quarter of 2020, it went worse to be minus 12.6% of the GDP. And moving on to Hong Kong as well, still from the Asia, in the first quarter of 2020, the economic is a minus 9.1% of the GDP. But however, in the second quarter of 2020, it is minus 9%. And moving on to South Korea, which is the latest data we gather, in the first quarter of 2020, the number is in the level of 1.4%. But however, it went worse in the second quarter of 2020 to be minus 2.9%. And also from European Union, Germany, in the first quarter of 2020, the economy went down 2.3%, and the second quarter of 2020, the number went down to be minus 11.7%. And not only the United States, even the European Union has also been confirmed to experience a recession. A strict lockdown to prevent the spread of coronavirus weighed heavily on the Europe's economy in the second quarter, causing a record of contractions more severe than experienced by the U.S. And the Eurozone's gross domestic product fell 40.3% on the annual basis, far exceeding the 32.9% 9% contractions in the U.S. economy over the same period, while the Eurozone's unemployment rate edged up to 7.8% in June. And meantime, in the United States, 11.1% of workers were unemployed in June. It is up sharply from 3.5% earlier this year. So what are the effects of the global recessions that threaten Indonesia? So let's check it in the next graphic. So here it is, the estimated impact of global recessions on Indonesia. First of all, we can take a look in the Washington recessions. So Indonesia's export to US may decline. And when we talk about financial markets, appetite is also would likely to be go down as well. And the second one is that Singapore recessions, as Singapore is our neighbor and Asian country. First of all, we can see foreign direct investment from Singapore to Indonesia would likely to go down. And also it will affect also in the export and import activity between two countries. And moving on to Hong Kong recessions, as we have a close relations with the country, the foreign direct investment from Hong Kong to Indonesia would likely to go down as well. And the welfare of Indonesian workers in Hong Kong would likely to be depressed as well. One of the effects of United States recessions on Indonesia can be seen on the potential decline in export and import activities, whereas the total trade between Indonesia and US from January to May 2020 recorded at $10.75 billion US dollar, with a surplus for Indonesia at $3.7 billion US dollar. And meanwhile, another impact that must also be anticipated is the decline in foreign direct investment, especially from Singapore and also Hong Kong, two countries with the largest value of foreign direct investment to Indonesia. Singapore's investment portions in the second quarter hit 28.8%, while Hong Kong portion reached 13% of the total investment in the first semester of 2020. How is the conditions of Indonesia's economy so far? So let's take a look at the data. And the data on Indonesia's economic growth in the next slide. Here it is. Through the next graphic, we can see Indonesia's GDP growth rate. As we compile it from the first quarter of 2019, the data showed up that 5.07%. Meanwhile, in the second quarter of 2019, the number went down a bit to be 5.05%. It remains stagnations in the third quarter of 2019. Meanwhile, in the fourth quarter of 2019, Indonesia's GDP growth rate was in a 4.97%. But however, in 2020, the first quarter, Indonesia's GDP growth rate was at the number of 2.97%. And meanwhile, the second quarter estimations by the Finance Ministry will hit minus 4.3%. Finance Minister Sri Mulyani revised the projected of national economic growth rate to be minus 4.3% in the second quarter of 2020. This figure is deeper than the initial projections of minus 3.8%. And the sharper decline in national economy is due to a number of industrial sectors whose performance has contracted considerably, from trade, mining, manufacturing to transportations. Even so, Sri Mulyani hopes that economic recovery will start in the third and fourth quarter. So, what are the steps taken by the government to anticipate or even avoid a recession? The information is in the next graphic. Here it is. We just compile strategy to avoid national economic recessions. First of all, government have various methods in here. First of all, massive government spending. And second of all, is loan restructuring incentive. The third one is that working capital loan guarantee. And also government gives subsidy for industry and businesses, and not to mention about social assistance distributions that government provided for the society. And these methods have aim to several goals, which is leverage domestic demand and consumptions. And the second one is that trigger or more business sector investment. And the third one is that the third aim is that to avoid layoff wave And the fourth one is that turning the wheels of the economy for sure. Economic observers are still quite optimistic that Indonesia's economic growth is still better than any other countries that have experienced recessions. So to avoid or to least minimize the risk to enter the recession zone, one thing that needs to be encouraged is the domestic consumptions. It is of course in line with Indonesia's GDP structure, which is largely supported by the household consumptions, which contributed 58% to the GDP in the first quarter of 2020. In the midst of many challenges and current situations, let's support and even criticize the government to do the best efforts to maintain the stability of the domestic economy. And stay tuned to market headlines because we will be right back after this quick break.
Rangkuman sentimen yang berhasil dihimpun oleh tim redaksi kami, di mana 3 emiten asal Indonesia masuk ke dalam daftar 12 saham dengan tingkat keyakinan tinggi pilihan JP Morgan.
Journal of Medias menyatakan, potensi vaksinnya untuk mencegah COVID-19 menghasilkan respon kekebalan kuat pada semua 45 pasien dalam uji coba tahap awal pada manusia. Dari dalam negeri, Presiden Joko Widodo akan membubarkan 18 lembaga di bawah pemerintahannya.
Bagaimana sebetulnya Menteri BUMN Erick Thohir dan juga Direktur Utama Krakatau Steel?
Dirutnya dan menterinya sama-sama kan milenial, harusnya lebih move on daripada apa yang sudah ada sebelum-sebelumnya.
Saksikan terus IDX Channel, Your Trustworthy Economic, Business, and Capital Market Channel.
Market hari ini sudah dibuka dan menghijau, begitu Anda ada di zona positif, akankah ini terus berlanjut?
Saya masih mencermati untuk saham-saham ini ya, tambangan, saham alam putra nih ya, asli kan kemarin belum naik, ini potensi naik.
Saksikan terus IDX Channel, Your Trustworthy Economic, Business, and Capital Market Channel.
Ease of large scales of social restrictions that happened recently leads better opportunity for transportation sectors. Statistik Indonesia even recorded surging flights in June. Statistik Indonesia recorded transportation sector has gradually gone back to normal as large-scale social restrictions has been eased in many regions. For example, domestic flights that carried 780,000 passengers in June 2020. The number jumped significantly from May 2020, which only carried 90,000 passengers. However, if we compare to June 2019 domestic flight, it is still far to catch. Compared to the last year, this year's domestic flight went down 88.9%. It goes even worse for international flights as it went down 98.84% compared to the last year.
Sudah ada relaksasi PSBB pada bulan Juni ini mulai bergeliat penerbangan domestiknya, meskipun kalau kita bandingkan dengan posisi normal masih jauh.
Other transportation that experienced increase is railway sector. Statistik Indonesia recorded train passengers has increased month to month as much as 69.4%. Jakarta, Rahajo Pakmo for IDX Channel. Statistik Indonesia recorded 160,000 foreign tourist arrivals in June 2020. Still, it went down 88% compared to the same period of last year. In June 2020, foreign visitor number were down 88.82% year-on-year to around 160,000 people. The month-to-month figures also fell by 2.06%, marking a return of the downward trend after a brief upstick in May that suggested a sign of recovery. Even Suharyanto, as the head of Statistik Indonesia, expressed pessimism as he said the recovery may take quite a long time. Cumulatively, the number of foreign tourist arrivals on Indonesia went down 59.96% to only 3.09 million in the first half of the year as the COVID-19 pandemic brought tourism to its knees, as Statistik Indonesia reported on Monday.
Dan kalau kita bandingkan secara tahunan, terjadi penurunan 88,85%.
With more than 82,000 visitors, Timor-Leste accounted for around half of all foreign arrivals tourists in June, followed by Malaysia with around 62,760 visitors and China with more than 2,000 visitors. Jakarta, Rajo Pamo for IDX Channel. As United States of America suffers deep recessions on the record, but the question is, will it take toll on Indonesia's economy? Senior economist of IndiHome, Peter Abdullah, stated that Indonesia will not receive big impact from it as Indonesia's national economy doesn't depend much on export to United States. Official data showed United States of America contracted at the annualized rate of 32.9% in the second quarter of the year. Of course, this creates nightmares for countries that depend its export to America. Luckily, Indonesia doesn't contribute much on export to United States. Besides that, senior economist of IndiHome, Peter Abdullah, stated that the export value doesn't contribute much on national economy. Therefore, Peter assured that U.S. recessions will not give significant impact to Indonesia.
Nah, jadi artinya semua merasakan, bukan hanya kita sebenarnya. Negara-negara tetangga kita juga atau semua mitra dagang Amerika pasti merasakan kalau mereka terjadi resesi seperti saat ini. Hanya memang apakah akan berpengaruh banyak terhadap ekonomi kita, memang nggak terlalu kuat sekali gitu. Tapi kalau dari sisi pengaruh pasti terpengaruh, terutama teman-teman kita yang bergerak di bidang industri yang saya katakan tadi ya, garment, tekstil, industri alas kaki yang selama ini katakanlah punya ketergantungan ekspor ke Amerika, itu akan sangat-sangat terganggu.
Peter stated that the government must only concern on handling COVID-19 and ensure business sector goes well so that household consumption can be stepped up. Peter emphasized that household consumption plays a big role in national economy. From Jakarta, Rizka Ayu for IDX Channel. Here it is an update data about coronavirus globally. And you just close our market headlines today. Please enjoy our next program on IDX Channel, your trustworthy economic business and capital market channel. I'm Claranta Wijaya. Have a nice evening and stay safe.